Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Janashalakam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sadhujatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Namastute Tapte Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Pranamami Haripriya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna session unit 1 of your Bhakti śāstrī course. So we'll be covering chapter 6 today. But before we start chapter 6, let us quickly revise what we discussed yesterday. So any quick points from our yesterday's class? Can you please share? Is my sound clear now? I changed my connection. So yes, quickly, some points from our yesterday's discussion. And I invite devotees to please switch on your cameras. Everyone is sitting, keeping your cameras off. And I'm inspired to switch off my own camera, seeing all of your cameras off. So which book are we discussing in these classes? Bhagavad Gita, right? Which chapter was covered yesterday?
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. What is that chapter?
Karma Yoga.
Karma Yoga. Are you sure?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so how does the chapter begin? Let me share my screen. So yes, we saw that how Krishna brings Karma Yoga in chapter 3 and chapter 4, specifically in verse 19, 319, 330. And then he again emphasized Jnana in 317, 433, 434, the last verses, right? So therefore, this chapter began with Arjuna's question. After he heard instructions on both where Krishna is emphasizing karma and is also emphasizing jnana. And we saw in first 6 chapters, why the screen is not coming. Just give me one moment. So in the first 6 verses of chapter 5, we saw how Krishna is emphasizing that the goal of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga is same. And still Karma Yoga is better. It is easier to perform than Karma Sannyas. And then later on, from verse 7 to 12, we saw that how Karma Yogi, that Nishkam Karma Yogi, while performing all activities, understands that he is a soul, not directly involved, only senses are interacting with sense objects. And therefore, he employs his body, mind, intelligence, and purified senses to perform action without attachment to results and doership mentality. With what purpose? Purpose for purification of his heart. Then from verse 13 to 16, we also saw that how after attaining that knowledge of soul or knowledge of peace, that Nishkam Karma Yogi, how he's enlightened in knowledge, specifically about the role of Jiva, role of the 3 modes of nature, and the role of Bhagavan, Ishwar. So who are the 3 doers in this world? And then from verse 17 to 26, there was an explanation on liberation. How the enlightened soul completely fixes his mind and intelligence on Paramatma and his qualities like impartiality. He makes Paramatma as his goal and surrenders unto him. So we had discussions related to this topic. So before we begin further, I want to read some selected passages from His Grace Purijan Prabhu's book, Surrender Unto Me. So in the first verse, Purijan Prabhu is writing that Arjuna's perplexity is giving Krishna the chance to stress further that work and renunciation are not opposed to each other. We just fix this. Why it's happening again and again? Just a second. And then, and specifically on that discussion about who is the doer. So His Grace Purijan Prabhu is explaining very wonderfully, actually. So let us directly read from that. So as you can see on your screens, It is from Surrender Unto Me. So Srila Vyasadeva refutes this idea in the section of Vedanta Sutra that begins Karta Shastrarth Vatvat. Which idea? Just to get the context. This idea. So now we understand that modes of material nature control our bodies. Both the modes and living entities are controlled by Supersoul. So although the Supersoul is the ultimate controller, he is not responsible for living entities' activities or reactions to them. Now someone can ask that if Jiva is there, modes of nature are there, and the Supreme Lord is there. So why is that only Supreme Lord, the Jiva is held accountable and responsible and not the Supreme Lord? Now someone can say if the modes of nature are working, so why the all blame goes to Jiva only? And even before that if the Supreme Lord is both the Jiva and the modes of nature are under the control of Supreme Lord, then it is the Supreme Lord who is the cause of all causes, who should be held accountable and responsible, and not Jiva. Jiva can do nothing out of his nothing on his own, out of his own accord. Now someone can say like that. And our acharyas are taking this argument in great detail. So then they're saying, so first of all, Srila Vyasadeva is refuting this argument in Vedanta Sutra. And he's saying that the Jiva soul must be the performer of action. So first thing to understand is that Jiva performs an action. Jiva has a role to play. If we say that Jiva has no role to play and everything is being done, everything is being carried out by Prakriti or Bhagavan, then all the teachings of all the Shastras will become redundant. Because if Jiva cannot do anything, why give instructions at all? So that's the first point to understand. And the same Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan is writing in his Govind Bhashya, that Jiva, not the modes of nature, is the doer. Why? Because the injunction of scripture must have some purpose. For example, instructions like Svarga Kamo Yajet, one who desires to attain to heaven should perform ritual sacrifice, and other instructions like that. If the modes of nature were the doer, these statements would serve no purpose. After all, scriptural injunctions engage the living entities in performing prescribed action by convincing him that he can act to bring about certain enjoyable results. Such a mentality cannot be aroused in the inert modes of nature. Right? This point is clear? And then this example is given. For example, a small boy to lift a weight, he has just seen his father lift. The boy first desired to lift the weight and then tries. He cannot possibly succeed, but his father sees his small son's desire, stands above him, and out of affection does the actual lifting. Thus, the father has actually lifted the weight, but he cannot be considered the only lifter. Right? So the boy, he sees his father who is lifting the weight, and he himself desires, and he tries. And when the father sees that my son is trying, he carries out the weight. Now, who is the doer here? So, father actually lifted the weight, but he's not the only doer, right? Unless the child desired and unless he made that attempt, the father would never have helped him. So, therefore, the living entity should not, like the child, become bewildered by false ego and pride and consider himself the sole doer of activities that he has no ability to perform. That does not mean, however, that living entity can avoid the responsibility of having performed the activity. because it was he who expressed the desire, he who made the attempt, and he who wants to enjoy the fruit. Okay. So, although there are three desires, but the responsibility lies with the jiva, because all action starts, they initiates with the desire of jivatma. And when he makes the attempt, if the Krishna sanctions, then the modes of nature carry out that task. So, and the last three verses were remaining of this chapter. Let's Okay, so we covered till verse 26 yesterday. So let us begin further. But before we start further, are there any questions from yesterday's session? Any comments, questions, anything that you want to ask based upon previous discussions? Okay, so let's move further. So, yesterday we saw that how Krishna concluded his discussion on how to gain liberation by following Nishkam Karma Yoga in complete knowledge. So that was Arjuna's question. Somewhere you are emphasizing jnana and somewhere you are emphasizing, you are asking me to act. Are they not contradictory? He says, no, they are not contradictory. If you perform Nishkam Karma Yoga, it leads to knowledge. And when you act in that knowledge, acting with the mood of detachment, dedicating your work to the super soul, you get moksha. So now in these next two verses, Krishna is introducing another topic, and he's telling that how that moksha can be attained by other means. What is that other mean? The means of dhyana yoga. So far Krishna has spoken about Nishkam Karma Yoga, he has spoken about Karma Kand, he has spoken about Karma Yoga and the subject of Jnana, and how these two are integrated. They are not different, but they are interrelated, interconnected, as we saw in the beginning of this chapter. Now he is introducing the next elevation, the another means through which that liberation can be attained, and that is Dhyana Yoga. So, Vivek Prabhu, can you please read this translation?
Hare Krishna. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated.
Yes. Please read the first two paragraphs of purport also.
Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity, and then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotion service. When one is well situated in devotion service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. This particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by the practice of mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. In the sixth chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the fifth, it is only preliminary explained. One has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the Pratyahara process in yoga, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half closed lids. There is no benefit in eyebrows. There is no benefit in closing the eyes altogether because then there is every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely because then there is the hazard of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up moving and down moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward senses, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme.
Yeah, continue. Next one.
This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger and thus feel the presence of the Supersoul in the transcendental situation. In the other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. Thus, this will be throughout truly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by the Ashtanga Yoga.
Yeah, so after explaining the characteristics of a Nishkam Karma Yogi who is situated in knowledge, Krishna is introducing the subject matter of Dhyan Yoga in these verses. Usually, people think that spirituality means inaction, to give up everything, go to forest, sit somewhere and meditate. But here, let's emphasize that there's no difference between Nishkam Karma Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. So, Krishna is telling how one can achieve the same super soul realization that is achieved through Ashtanga Yoga. Right? So, when one is purified in vision and activities by Nishkam Karma Yoga, only then one can begin to practice and make advancement in Ashtanga Yoga. Okay, so then the next verse, very famous verse of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada oftentimes called it as a peace formula. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatpa mam shantim rachati. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all the sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactors and well-wishers of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Now, many scholars are confused after reading this verse. Why Krishna is suddenly speaking this verse at this context? How is it related to the topic that is being discussed? How is it related to Nishkam Karma Yoga, or how is it related to Ashtanga Yoga? And why suddenly Krishna is speaking about his own feature? Right? The goal of Jnanis is Brahman realization. The goal of yogis are Paramatma. But here Krishna is speaking directly about himself. How this verse is connected to the previous verses and why it is suddenly spoken here. And sometimes it bewilders them so much. This is perhaps some Vaishnav scholar has added this verse. It was not there originally at this place, and they have added this. Of course, there is no truth to it. There is no proofs of that. But our Acharyas explains the significance of this verse specifically at this junction. So, one way to understand is if we look at the structure of the teachings of the Gita. So, the structure is that it does not move in purely linear way, right? Sometimes it gives us prior hints before dealing with the topic in full. And it frequently includes later reminders of previous ideas as well. So sometimes Krishna gives the glimpse of and small suggestions about what is to become. Right? But actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains the real significance of this verse at this time. And he writes, let us read directly from him. It's a very interesting. Just a second. What's happening? So, if you see this verse, this verse explains that Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam. So, Krishna is saying he is Bhoktaram of the Yagya. Who performs Yagya? Where was it discussed? Specifically about the Karma Yogis, right? You read about Yagyas in relation to Nishkam Karma Yogi. Which chapter where? Chapter 3 and chapter 4, right? So, Krishna is saying he is the goal of Karma Yogis. And about Tapasya, who performs Tapasya? Specifically the Jnanis. So that means Krishna is saying, I am the object of worship of Karma Yogis and Jnanis. As well as Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, right? What do we mean by Sarvaloka Maheshwaram? That he is the supreme controller. Who is the supreme controller? Paramatma. So Paramatma is the goal of yogis. So that means Krishna is the object of worship for the yogis as well. So through Yagya Tapasa and Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, he is the goal of Karma Yogis, Jnanis, and Yogis. Now, further, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is writing, I am the friend of all entities who gives benefit to all living entities by instructions about bhakti through the medium of my devotees out of my mercy. So therefore, Krishna is the object of worship for devotees as well. When we say that Krishna is a supreme well-wishing friend, so he is a supreme well-wishing friend of entities who is doing the welfare work for all the other entities, who is giving the instructions of bhakti. So by that definition, he's the object of worship for bhaktas also. So one cannot attain realization of me, who am beyond the modes by sattva guna gyan. I have said that I am attainable only by bhakti. Thus the yogis attain liberation only after realizing me, the object of his worship as Paramatma, by bhakti, which is beyond the modes. So this means if the karma yogi has to be successful, bhakti is needed. If the jnana yogis has to be successful, bhakti is needed. If the ashtanga yogis has to be successful, bhakti is needed. And what to talk about bhaktas, which is completely dedicated to the personality of Godhead Krishna, right? That is why initially we saw that bhakti is kept in the center, is giving life to karma and gyan. So the linking process, the yoga happens only through bhakti. So through bhakti, the karma yogis will get their desire fulfilled. The jnana yogis will get their desire fulfilled. They'll follow that path of jnana yoga. They'll follow that path of sacrifice. They'll follow the path of ashtanga yoga. But ultimately, bhakti has to be there, as evident by this particular verse. And through this verse, Gyatva Mam Shantim Rachati. A person attains peace, absolute peace beyond the modes of nature. To get this peace, this peace is not possible within the three modes of nature. That is why Krishna is writing, he is beyond the modes. He is beyond even sattva guna. So that is possible only when one understands that it is Krishna who is the goal. He is Bhoktaram of all my yagyas and all my tapasyas. He is Sarvaloka Maheshwaram and he is Surhit Sarva Bhutanam. When one knows Krishna to be in these world, then one can attain peace and their desired goals. Okay. So this concludes our chapter 5. So let us start with chapter 6 then. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yasa Sannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniraknirna Cha Kriya. Okay, please read the translation and purport, first chapter. Priya Parashar Mataji, can you read?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Anashritah Karma Phalam.
The translation and the purport.
Okay. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the Eightfold Yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the Eightfold Yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of Karma Yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self interest. Some personal gratification can be concentrated or extended. The criteria of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self satisfaction, but the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the Supreme Whole and not for personal satisfaction is the perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties and therefore they cease to perform Agnihotra Yagyas, fire sacrifices. But actually, they are self interested because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a
That's it for today. Thank you. So we are saying that, and just like we discussed, that Krishna introduced the subject matter of Ashtanga Yoga previously in chapter 5 itself, and now he'll be explaining that in more detail. And some Acharya says that he's establishing this path of Ashtanga Yoga ultimately to be rejected by Arjuna, and then the glory of Bhakti will be established. That how it is not practical for the present age. Yet, and the principles are very similar, and they can award liberation if someone can take that up. So now to understand few points, before taking up the practice and advanced stages of Ashtanga Yoga, what is the qualification that is needed based upon previous chapters? The heart has to be purified by the performance of Nishkam Karma Yoga. There has to be that kind of advancement. And as we will see in further verses, that one must be in full control of mind. And one must be completely indifferent to and unaffected by all material things. So anyway, these will come then in the advanced stages of Ashtanga Yoga, but in the verses 1 to 4, it is established how one can advance in this yoga by performance of detached work. So in this verse, it is said, it is explained what is real renunciation. It manifests in detachment from possessiveness and enjoying propensity, not necessarily in giving up the action, but giving up this mentality of enjoyment. And Srila Prabhupada emphasized that how Krishna consciousness is the ultimate level of selflessness, because devotee desires only the pleasure of Krishna. And we read in the purport that how although it is recommended, the Lord emphasizes that the process of karma yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness is better. So let us go on. Let us read. So in the next verse, Krishna will explain the relationship between sannyas and yoga. Please read Mandleshwar Prabhu, can you read verses 2, 3, and 4? Translation. We have a lot of reading to do today, this chapter. Mandleshwar Prabhu, are you reading?
Yes, Prabhu.
Verse 2, 3, and 4.
What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga or linking oneself with Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one can never become yogi unless he renounces the desires of sense gratification. Should I read purport, Prabhu?
Just the translation.
Okay. Text 3, Prabhu. For one who is neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of the mental activities is said to be the means. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all mental desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engage in fruitive activities. One must.
That's it. So as we read in the verse 3, Arurukshor munir yogam karma karanam uchyate. Yoga rudhasya tasyeva shama karanam uchyate. So there are two stages, there are two levels. So in the level 1, that means in the beginning stages, what is said? The work is said to be the means. That means a yogi is not supposed to give up the work in the beginning stages. He's supposed to act, perform his prescribed duties, but in a nishkama way. And then there is stage 2. One who is elevated in yoga. At that stage, one can give up material activities. So, Srila Prabhupada explains the technical details. Yes. So the process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga, right? It is compared with the ladder. The ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entities and rises up to the perfect self-realization. So according to various elevation, different parts of the ladder are known by different names. So this ladder means connection with the Supreme, till the topmost level of self-realization. And there are different stages in it, different steps in it. So wherever the practitioner is situated is called by that name. And that ladder is basically divided into three parts. That is Jnana Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called Yoga Rurukshu stage, and the highest rung is called Yoga Ruda stage. Concerning the Eightfold Yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting postures are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. And when one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. And how at the level of Krishna consciousness, that a Krishna conscious, a bhakta, is situated in the platform of meditation from the very beginning, because he's always thinking of Krishna. So, in the Yoga Ruruksha stage, that is the beginning stage, prescribed duties are essential to gradually purify one's heart. And in this stage, one practices different asana. And they perform work, but they cultivate detachment. Now, in the advanced stage of Yoga Ruda stage, what happens? One retires from active duties for contemplation and meditation. So this stage begins when the pratyahar is perfect. And they stop working, specifically on the dhyana stage. So after, in the purport of this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is answering this question, especially in the fourth verse, that should the Ashtanga Yogi perform his prescribed duties as long as he lives? Says no. Ashtanga Yogi performs prescribed duties in the beginning stages, but in the advanced stages, they give up all sorts of activities, fruitive activities specifically. So, verse 4 is explaining the advanced stage of Dhyana Yoga. So, this is the stage when one renounces all material desires and they renounces, they don't act for sense gratification, they don't engage in fruitive acts. Okay. So now, after giving this brief description, Lord Krishna is explaining that non-attraction to sense objects and mind control is required to come to this advanced stage of Dhyana Yoga. And therefore, importance of mind control is given in the next two verses. Because without mind control, one cannot reach that stage. So therefore, it says, Uddharet atman atmanam natmanam avasadayet atmeva hi atmano bandhur atmeva ripuratmana. Uddharet atmana atmanam. So this word atma means body, mind, and soul. Okay. So different places, different meanings are used in the terms of atmana. Uddharet atmana. That means one should deliver oneself by atmana. That means mind. Na atmanam avasadayet. Na atmanam. That means the atma, which is bound, living entity, avasadayet. One should not be degraded by atma, the mind. Because this mind is atmeva hi atmano bandhur. This mind is the friend of atma, the living entities. Atmeva ripur atmana, as well as his enemy. And the Upanishad says the same thing. So mind can act as one's friend and mind can act as one's enemy. When is mind a friend? When the mind is controlled. When the mind is following the dictation of super soul. When the mind is detached from sense gratification, then the mind is our friend. Then the same mind will elevate us. And when the mind acts as an enemy, when the mind is under the subjugation of lust, anger, greed, envy, when the mind is attached to sense gratification, and then the mind degrades us and entangles us. So the central point of yoga practice is mind and the mind control. How to draw mind away from sense gratification, from the sense objects, and to control it and make it a friend and discharge the mission of human form of life. So, Srila Prabhupada explains the importance of training the mind. That mind control must be done. Without mind control, yoga is simply a waste of time. How to train the mind? In what principles to train the mind? So that the mind doesn't become attracted by the glitter of material nature. That the mind is not degraded by its attachment and attraction to sense gratification, sense objects. And he quotes verses from Upanishad. And then Lord Krishna continues further. Bandhuratmana atmanastasya yena atmaevatmana jita anatmanastu shatrutve vardet atmaeva shatruvat. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So then, after explaining the importance of mind control, in the next 3 verses, Krishna is describing the symptoms of a person with a controlled mind, specifically on the level 2. That means yoga road platform in the advanced stages of yoga. So, characteristics of a person who has controlled mind are, Krishna is saying, for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Can someone please read the next 2 verses translation? Divya Leela Mataji, can you read?
Hare Krishna. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebble, stone, or gold, as the same. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral meditators, and envious friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind.
Okay, so what are the characteristics or the symptoms of a yoga ruda stage or the advanced stage of yoga? One who has controlled the mind. The first symptom is they are completely neutral to material existence and the dualities in this world. They are neutral. Then they sees all objects equally, pebble, gold, and stone. The source of their satisfaction is the Gyan and Vigyan. They're completely satisfied by that. And they sees everyone equally. They sees all people equally. Okay. So now, so far, Krishna has described these stages, and Krishna has described the importance of mind control and the symptom of someone who is on the advanced stage and he or she has controlled the mind. But now, naturally, the question is how to reach this stage. And therefore, in the next verses, Krishna explains the procedure of Dhyana Yoga. From verses 10 onwards till verse 32. He describes, he lays out the process of Dhyana Yoga. Specifically from verse 10 to 17, Lord Krishna is explaining the basic practices of meditation. And then from 18 to 32, Krishna is explaining the perfection in meditation. Okay. So let us read from verse 10 to 17. Can someone volunteer to read, please? Just the translation.
Hare Krishna, shall I?
Yes, Madhuri, please.
From 7, from 7?
From verse 10 to 17.
Okay.
So how to execute Dhyana Yoga, that procedure is there. Okay. Let us hear and read. Yes, Mataji.
A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated mind, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence.
So this is the result of long practice of Dhyana Yoga. Krishna is saying, Nirvana paramam adhigacchati, mat sanstam adhigacchati. The mat sanstan, my abode, is reached. Okay, yes, continue.
There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjun, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough.
So what are some of the obstacles in the practice of Dhyana Yoga? Okay, so these are some obstacles. So he described the practice, then he described the result. Now he's describing beware of some obstacles. Yes, continue.
He who has regulated his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
Yes. So let us make one table here. This also reminds me, Mother, you were asking about at the table of the sacrifices yesterday. Strangely, I somehow came across that table today morning. So I'll share you. Please remind me.
Yeah, thank you.
So yes, Harshita Mataji, the Dhyana yogis can also attain the transcendental goal. So there are a Brahman, the one who receives Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. There are 3 levels of realizations, and all 3 are the transcendental goals. So Paramatma is ultimately the Shirodaksha Vishnu within the heart. So they attain that abode. May not be Krishna in Vrindavan, 2-handed form, but the realization of Paramatma is definitely a transcendental goal. So they attain, right? And then similar to this, because this question is there, so then there is Srila Prabhupada in their purport to all these verses, he's mentioning about Ashtanga Yoga and is also explaining that how Krishna consciousness fulfills all these criterias. And the practice of Krishna consciousness already have all these elements included. Okay. So maybe we can, right? What is the criteria? Here the verse number. So from verses 10 to 17, read out the purports and compare the elements of Ashtanga Yoga with Krishna consciousness. So one criteria is based upon the principle, then relationship with Supreme, place of practice. So for example, if you read verse 10, what is the principle of Ashtanga Yoga? To engage one's body, mind, and self in relationship with Supreme. Right? And what is the principle of Krishna consciousness? It's the same. In terms of relationship with the Supreme, if you read the purport to verse 10, so impersonalists and yogis are, Srila Prabhupada is writing, are partially, that means, imperfectly and indirectly Krishna conscious. And a devotee is fully Krishna conscious, perfect and in direct relationship with Supreme. Then in terms of place of practice, verse 10, Ashtanga Yogi has to live alone and at secluded places. Why? What is the purpose? They want to avoid all distraction by sense objects. But a devotee, Srila Prabhupada writes, they stay in good association and they avoid unwanted association. The next criteria is about the mind control. So, the Ashtanga Yogi, Prabhupada writes, struggles hard to fix mind on super soul. But a devotee, they always think of Krishna. And never forgets him. So like that, go through the verses till verse 17. I've given just 3-4 criteria. Similarly, there can be, 10 to 11 criteria and more. Yeah. So consciousness, in terms of consciousness, that they're free of desire and possessiveness. So this is a prerequisite for an Ashtanga yogi to practice this stage. But for Krishna consciousness, right in the beginning stages, wherein there is very little chance for material possessiveness, because Rupa Goswami gives the principles of Yukta Vairagya. Then the manner of sitting, not too high, not too low, or deer skin, about kushagra, straight posture. But for devotee, no such prescription has been given. Celibacy, that is must for Gyan and Dhyan school. Bhakti, the Krishna consciousness is the only school which allows Grihast Brahmachari concept. That a person living in Grihast ashram, following all the principle, is same as, Brahmachari or the sannyas ashram. It is not possible in the other schools of transcendence. Then object of meditation. For Ashtanga Yogi, it is the Vishnu Murti. For a Bhakta, devotee sees Krishna everywhere. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadai Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. Right? Because they are in love with Krishna. So goal of life, Krishna in the heart of every living entity, which is indicated by Mat Chitta and Mat Para. And the goal, Bhakta, is Krishna. So like that, Srila Prabhupada has compared the two paths within these verses. Okay. So now, from verses 10 to 17, Lord Krishna described how to meditate. Now, Krishna will describe the perfectional stage of Ashtanga Yoga in the next verses from 18 to 32. This was just the beginning stages. This is how we begin this path, but the perfectional stages, how do they look like? What happens? Let us read. Can someone please continue? 18 to 32 translation.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, please. Yes, read through.
When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities, situated in transcendental devote of all material desires, he is
Can't hear you. Okay, can someone else continue, please?
Shall I, Prabhuji?
Please, yes, continue.
When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self.
So
In
Krishna
this-
giving an example of the previous verse. In verse 18, he is giving an example who is said to be well established in yoga. And then he's giving a graphic example to explain the stage in the verse 19. Yes, please continue.
In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from it, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact.
So this is a realization of a yogi who has attained that perfection. What is his realization? He relishes boundless transcendental happiness. Why? Because he directly experiences soul and super soul within the heart. He thinks that there's no greater joy, and his focus is never deviated. And therefore, he escapes all miseries because he's always focused on Paramatma. So, Srila Prabhupada explains that what is actual samadhi? Said for a yogi, the actual samadhi means to realize super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying self with the super soul. If this misconception is there that Atma and Paramatma are one, then there's no perfection. So for a actual bona fide yogi, Srila Prabhupada, there's without any misgiving. And then Srila Prabhupada cites various references from Patanjali's concept of Kaivalya. Okay, yes, continue, Mataji.
One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith, and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon, without exception, all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind.
So Krishna is prescribing the methods to attain this realization that he just mentioned in the previous verse. So how to attain that advanced stage of yoga? Krishna is prescribing his methods in this. Okay, in this verse and then the next verse. So what is the method that he's prescribing in this verse specifically? If we see, sa nishchayena yoktavyo, with firm determination. So required is patience and determination. Okay. And Srila Prabhupada gives an example. Okay, Mataji, can you please read the purport to this verse also, please?
Yes. The yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. Regarding Bhakti Yoga, Rupa Goswami says, Utsaha Nishchaya Dhairya Tattat Karma Pravartana Sangadyaga Sakundhite Shadvir Bhakti Prasiddhati. One can execute the process of Bhakti Yoga successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. Deshamrit programs. As for determination, one should follow the example of a sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. A sparrow laid her eggs on the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its waves. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal, so the sparrow decided to dry up the ocean. She began to pick out the water in her small beak, and everyone laughed at her for her impossible determination. The news of her activity spread, and at last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward his small sister bird, and so he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus Garuda at once asked the ocean to return her eggs, lest he himself take up the bird. The ocean was frightened at this and returned. Thus the sparrow became happy by the grace of God. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga and Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very approachable. But if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help, for God helps those who help themselves.
So once His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj was taking class in ISKCON Punjabi Bagh. So Maharaj was mentioning that this entire universe is created in such a way that if one is determined, all help is sent to that person. And he quoted the same story of a sparrow. What was the possibility of a sparrow to empty the ocean? What was the possibility? But she was determined, and all help came to her. So this principle, if one follows a principle with great determination, not weak determination, but great determination, the Lord will surely help. God helps those who help themselves. You hear, any lecture of His Holiness Gopal Krishna Swami Maharaj, she again and again and again emphasized this principle on, many, in his answers to many questions. Maharaj, how to do this? Maharaj, how to do that? Maharaj, this difficulty and that difficulty. Maharaj says, if you try, if you endeavor for it, you'll be able to do it. Because God helps those who help themselves. Sometimes we think, okay, we have come to Bhakti, Krishna will take care. Just surrender, raise your hands, don't do anything, and just lie back. No, God help those who help themselves. So it is help yourself, help themselves. That means take an action, be determined. So what are the principles that are mentioned in this? First is of patience, then is of determination, and then without deviation. And having that faith, that means one has to be confident and pursue the path with great perseverance. Control senses by mind and give up all material desires which are born of mental concoction. If one follows, just like this, Prabhupada gives a story, all blessings will come. Okay, we cannot succeed without blessings. Still, we have to show our sincerity by making our determined efforts. Okay, and then next verse continues on the same theme, in which Krishna is prescribing the methods to attain these higher stages of yoga. Yes, continue, Mataji.
Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. From wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self.
Okay, so in this verse, Krishna is using very interesting adjectives to describe the mind. What are they? Yata yata nischalati manha chanchalam astiram. So, what is the nature of mind? It is flickering. It is unsteady. So, nischalati means wandering. Chanchalam means flickering. And asthira means unsteady. So, Krishna is describing mind by nischalati, chanchalam, asthiram. And by steady intelligence, one has to overcome all these mental tendencies. They cannot indulge mind and gratify their senses. They must know for certain that yielding to mind will destroy the tranquility. Rather, they are fixed in the self, not in their thoughts, which may be influenced by previous passionate conditioning. And therefore, Krishna is speaking about the next verse. Yes, continue, Mataji.
The yogi, whose mind is fixed on me, verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. Thus, the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord.
So, yes. So, if we take a look at these two verses, 27 and 28, Krishna is describing this Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. right? Brahma Bhuta. What is Brahma Bhuta platform? So in the purport, okay, can someone else read the purport also? If someone else would like to want, yes, Mataji, please continue.
Verse 27 का purport, Prabhuji?
This Brahma Bhuta 27 purport.
Brahma Bhuta is the state of being free from material contamination and situated in the transcendental service of the Lord. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param, Bhagavad Gita 18.54. One cannot remain in the quality of Brahman, the Absolute, until one's mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Sarve Manah Krishna Padaravindeyo. To be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, or to remain in Krishna consciousness, is to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all material contamination.
Okay, so Prabhupada defines the Brahma Bhuta platform. It's a state in which one is free from material contamination and one is situated in the loving transcendental service of the Lord. How one can attain this state? By fixing one's minds. Savai Mana Krishna Padarvinde. Where? On the lotus feet of Krishna. So then, in the next verse, Krishna is describing what is a perfectional stage of yoga for a dhyana yogi, that is realizing the super soul. Please read this purport also, Mataji.
Self-realization means knowing one's constitutional position in relationship to the Supreme. The individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme, and his position is to render transcendental service to the Lord. This transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Samsparsha.
So Krishna is further clarifying this point in the next verse. Please read the next verse also.
A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Purport. A Krishna-conscious yogi is the perfect seer because he sees Krishna, the Supreme, situated in everyone's heart as Super Soul, Paramatma. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hirdeshe Arjun Tishtati. The Lord in his Paramatma feature is situated within both the heart of the dog and that of a Brahmana. The perfect yogi knows that the Lord is eternally transcendental and is not materially affected by his presence in either a dog or a Brahmana. That is the supreme neutrality of the Lord. The individual soul is also situated in the individual heart, but he is not present in all hearts. That is the distinction between the individual soul and the super soul. One who is not factually in the practice of yoga cannot see so clearly. A Krishna conscious person can see Krishna in the heart of both the believer and the non-believer. In the Smriti, this is confirmed as follows. Atattvach cha matrittvach cha atma hi paramo harihi. The Lord, being the source of all beings, is like the mother and the maintainer. As the mother is neutral to all different kinds of children, the Supreme Father or Mother is also. Consequently, the Super Soul is always in every living being.
Okay, that's it. So, what is the vision of a yogi who's in this perfectional stage, right? So after describing this vision, what is the benefit of having this vision? That Krishna explains in the next verse. Can you read the translation of the next verse?
For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me.
Would you like to have that vision where you are always seeing Krishna everywhere and you are never losing the sight of Krishna and Krishna never loses you? Right? Would you like to have that vision? Are you
Yes,
sure?
Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
But if you see Krishna everywhere, then will that not be an interruption in the sense gratification? What do you think?
It is transcendental.
So anywhere you are seeing Krishna and your mind, Krishna says, I'm the enjoyer. And you're thinking, oh, I wanted to enjoy this. And I'm seeing Krishna, so I can't enjoy. Is it not an interruption? You really want to desire that state? Why so?
So when if a day will come, then when I will be able to see Krishna everywhere, then I won't have that desire of sense gratification. Then. So
Yeah.
param shwanivartati.
Yeah, thank you. So you can practice seeing Krishna everywhere. So we can practice by start seeing Krishna in the heart of all living entities around you. So you can take that task for next 1 week, practicing Krishna in the heart of living entities. And you can offer obeisances to that Krishna. Okay, so Krishna in the next verses, this is verse 31. So in verse 31, Krishna is describing the super soul realization, that even this realization is a worshipful service to him if the yogi has proper knowledge. Okay, so let's read next verse also, Madhuri.
Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances.
So after describing the vision of a yogi, the perfectional stage, what are the benefits? Now in this verse, Krishna is describing the actions of such a yogi. How does he act? He engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and super soul are one. So by his proper worship, the yogi understands the actual situation of the soul in the material world, right? If one does this, what is mentioned in this verse, if one worship super soul properly, what happens? What are the further insight into that realization? So please read the next verse also. Let me share the screen once again. If you have Bhagavad Gita, Mataji, you can continue reading.
He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Should I continue, Prabhuji?
So after hearing description of Ashtanga Yoga, what is the response of Arjuna?
Arjun said, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady.
Continue reading, Madhuri.
For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Lord Sri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work, but he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion.
So just a second. So what is Arjuna's query here at this point? He's saying, whatever you have described is very wonderful, but it seems impractical for me. And I can't do that. Why I can't do that? What is the challenge that he's facing? Why he said this is impractical? because he has experience of his own mind. And what he's saying? Chanchalatvat sthitam sthiram. That this mind is chanchal, is restless. It is asthiram, it is not steady. And if this was so, even when the Kali Yuga began, what is the situation 5,000 years down the line? If that was the realization of one of the greatest personality alive at that time, what is the position of a so-called common person in the present day in Kali Yuga? So what are the characteristics of Kali Yuga? Prayena alpashu sabhya kalavasmin yuge jana. Manda sumanda matyo. That's such a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. And anyway, people are not serious about self-realization, even by simple practical means. What to talk about this Ashtanga Yoga, in which so many regulations are required: how to live, how to sit, how to select a place, and to detach the mind from all material engagement. And what was the qualification of Arjuna at that time? He belonged to a royal family. He was a great warrior. His duration of life was much longer. He was an intimate friend of Lord Krishna. So, oftentimes you'll see, especially in the writings of Srila Prabhupada, he's condemning modern day yoga schools. Why? Primarily because of the missing goal. Because they are completely ignorant of the desired goal. How many yoga schools are there which are speaking about the Paramatma realization? Or how many of them are speaking about detachment from sense gratification? Or going and selecting a suitable place and giving up all sorts of, a sense objects. And then he's continuing his own realization in the next verse. Chanchalam hi manha Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manne vayureva tudushkaram. He's saying the mind is chanchal. He's pramati, he's agitating. He's a balvat, he's so strong. At the same time, he's dridam, he's so obstinate. So, tasyaham nigraham manne vayu eva sudushkritam. I can control wind, I can control vayu, but to nigraha this mind, it is, I consider it more difficult than subduing the wind. And Srila Prabhupada gives the analogy of the chariot, that the individual soul is a passenger in that chariot. And this chariot is compared with the body. The driver is the intelligence, and the rope is the mind. The horses are the senses. And Prabhupada is writing, what is the easiest way to control the mind? As suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance. How to chant? In all humility. So the easiest, the most practical, the most effective method, the most assured method of controlling and subduing the mind is chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra in humility. Not some humility, in all humility. So what is the solution to mind control? This problem that has been posed by Arjuna. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Asanchayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kaunteya Vairagyena cha Grihyate. Okay, can someone please continue reading? Someone else? Can
Prabhuji, may I?
Yes, please.
Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Purport. The difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind as expressed by Arjuna is accepted by the personality of Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place. Focusing the mind on the super soul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn Vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind and spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because of hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. This attachment is called Pareshanubhuti, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like cursing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuffs offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, so Krishna is agreeing to Arjuna. Yes, what you're saying is right. Mind is very chanchal, he's very ziddhi, and he's very obstinate. He's very unsteady, but you can control mind if you strive by the right means. What are those right means? Twofold: Abhyas and Vairagya. Abhyas means practice. That means certain sets of do's. You do this. And detachment means certain sets of don't. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. You give up the things which are unfavorable and you engage, accept things which are favorable. So what is that practice? What are those certain sets of do's? The process of sadhana bhakti, starting with shamanam. Shamanam, about Krishna. Chanting, kirtanam, Vishnu smaranam, padasevanam, archanam, vandanam, dasyam, sakyam, atmanivedanam. All these are different forms of practice. And Vairagya, what do we mean by Vairagya? Certain sets of don'ts. It means detaching our mind from matter and engaging it in the spirit. So anything that is taking mind away from Krishna, give up that. That is Vairagya. So, and then Srila Prabhupada is also speaking about Pareshanubhava. That means spiritual satisfaction that one experienced by positive attachment to service of Krishna. It is practical because when one hears about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. And Prabhupada gives an example of a hungry man who feels satisfaction and nourished when he eats food. So this entire process of devotional service is compared to curing a disease by the process called Krishna consciousness. So what is the treatment for all these things? First is hearing about Krishna, and the diet is honoring prasad, food stuff offered to Krishna. These are the ways to control mind. And then Krishna is continuing on this line about how important it is to control the mind. Yes, Mataji, can you continue reading, please?
For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. But the
Yes,
Supreme
that's it. So, after hearing so much about, Adhyana Yoga, how difficult it appeared for Arjuna, and Krishna agreed, especially because of nature of mind. And then Krishna is prescribing strive by the right means, have practice and detachment. And if you don't control mind, this entire self-realization is very difficult. But if you follow by the right means, you will be assured of success. So naturally, now a question that Arjuna is asking on behalf of all of us, after hearing so many instructions about mind, that what happens if I try to control mind, but I am not able to do that, and I fall down in the process? What will be my destination? Arjuna Vacha Ayitaha Shraddhaya Upeto Yoga Charitamanasa Aprapya Yoga Sansiddhim Kamgatim Krishna Gacchati. O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith? Right? Ayati Shraddhayo Peto. But who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection and mysticism. So, Kam Gatim Krishna Gacchati. Kam Gatim, what is the destination? Krishna Gacchati, what does he achieve? So, if someone begins this path but deviates, why a person can deviate? Because of what is Arjuna asking? Due to worldly mindedness. Aprapya yoga sansiddhi. So, what does it show? That one can begin the process with faith. And one can be very excited in the beginning. One can be very faithful. But it is possible that midway, one can waver due to worldly mindedness. And then he further clarifies his question in the next verse. It says, Kaschin no bhayo vibhrastas chinna bhram eva nashyati apratishto mahabaho vimudo brahmanapadi. That kachit na ubhayo. Ubhayo means both. Vibhrascha chinna abram. Is he not like a cloud who is chinna, who is torn by the various winds? So, O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both ubhayo, spiritual and material success, and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? And then he's writing, he's speaking, this is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely, but for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So only Krishna can clarify this doubt. Why only Krishna can clarify? Prabhupada is writing. Yes, can you please read this purport? Anyone, please?
Krishna consciousness is the perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord said that all living entities existed individually in the past, they exist now and in the present, and they continue to retain individual identity in the future. Even after liberation from the material entanglement, so he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. No one is equal to or above Krishna, and certainly the so-called great sages and philosophers who are at the mercy of material nature cannot equal him. Therefore, the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer of all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly. But no one knows him. Krishna and Krishna conscious devotees alone can know what is what.
Prabhuji, you are on mute.
Voice is not coming, Prabhuji.
So why, how that Krishna is the knower of past, present, and future. The very first instruction that Krishna gave in Gita, Nat vivaham jatunasham, Atma mene, that the spirit soul, it was the individual in the past, it is individual in the present, it is individual in the future. So that means Krishna knows past, present, future. On this basis, Arjuna is asking Krishna. So, Srila Prabhupada writes that Krishna and Krishna conscious devotees alone can know what is what. Right. So then Krishna is answering Arjuna's question. And this question of Arjuna is very significant. And in the purport, if you read the purports, Srila. So in the previous purports, Srila Prabhupada explains this query of Arjuna, that why he's comparing a transcendentalist who has failed with a cloud. Because apparently such a person lost both connections. He or she lost material happiness, neither they could get spiritual perfection. Just like a cloud, which is separated, which is deviated from the bigger cluster of clouds. The cloud is separated from the small clouds and they do not join the big clouds. What happens to such a cloud? They're blown away by the wind. So, he's taking shelter of Krishna once again and asking this very important question. And then Krishna is clarifying, okay, that how a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities meets no destruction, either in this world nor in the next. How this path of transcendence is supremely glorious. There is no loss. Okay, so let us read the translation till verse 45, please. Prabhu, can you continue reading the translation?
Yes. The Supreme Personality of God has said, O son of Partha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attached to the yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contamination and ultimately achieving perfection after many words of practice, he attains the supreme goal. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi.
Okay, thank you. So let us look into the reply of Krishna to Arjuna's important query. So first, the first point Krishna is establishing in that question, that a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Let us read the purport to this verse also.
Yes, Fuji. If someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete center of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. For material prospects, there are many activities, both scriptural and customary. A transcendentalist is supposed to give up all material activities for the sake of spiritual advancement, is supposed to give up all material activities for this, or one may argue that by Krishna consciousness one may attain the highest perfection of if it is completed. But if one does not attain such a perfectional stage, then he loses both materially and spiritually. It is enjoined in the scriptures that one has to suffer the reaction for not executing prescribed duties. Therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subjected to these reactions. The Bhagavatam assures the unsuccessful transcendentalist that there need be no worries, even though he may be subjected to the reaction for not perfectly executing prescribed duties. He is still not a loser because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten, and one so engaged in will continue to be so even if he is low on in the next life. On the other hand, one who simply follows strictly the prescribed duties need not necessarily attain auspicious result if he is lacking in Krishna consciousness.
Okay, thank you. So,
Yes.
what is the role of material duties? For material prospects, there are many activities, both spiritual, both scriptural and customary. Sure, Prabhupada is writing. So, what is the expectation of this verse from a transcendentalist? That is supposed to give up all material activities for the sake of spiritual advancement. But what are the arguments that are given by conditioned soul? That Krishna consciousness may offer the highest perfection if completed. But if one does not attain perfectional stage, then he loses both material and spiritual. You are asking me to give up all material engagement and take to Krishna consciousness, that because Krishna consciousness gives the highest result. But if I don't attain perfection in Krishna consciousness, then I am a loser. I lost both materially and spiritually. And then Lord Krishna is assuring, no. What is the scriptural understanding? That one has to suffer the reaction for not executing prescribed duties. So therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subject to these reactions. Right? That is, scripture says you cannot give up your prescribed duties. But if someone gives up prescribed duties to pursue Krishna consciousness, is he not a failure? Krishna is saying, no, still no loss. And Srila Prabhupada is quoting the Bhagavatam, that even though one may be subjected to the reaction for not perfectly executing one's prescribed duties, he's still not a loser. Why? Because whatever Krishna conscious activities that a practitioner has done, they are never lost. They are eternal. And even if one takes birth in any other species of life, that practice stays with him and they'll continue making progress from that stage. On the other hand, let us say if one becomes materially perfect without Krishna consciousness, then their destination may not be auspicious. So then in the next verse, in the next paragraph, Srila Prabhupada is writing that how humanity is divided into two sections. One is regulated and one is non-regulated. Regulated means one who are following prescribed duties according to Shastra. So their activities are auspicious and they will gradually come to Krishna consciousness. And then they are non-regulated, who are simply engaged in sense gratification. They do not have any knowledge about next life or any concept of moksha or spiritual salvation. So activities of such persons are never auspicious. They always remain in material existence and they always are miserable. So externally, they may appear civilized, they may appear uncivilized, they may be educated, uneducated, strong or weak. But if there is no Krishna consciousness, it is shram eva hi kevalam. The activities are failures, specifically for those who are simply involved in sense gratification and have no conception whatsoever about spiritual salvation. So now, among the regulated, who are following the auspicious path, Srila Prabhupada is writing, they can be further divided into three categories. What are they? The first is fruitive workers. The second are the Jnanis, and third are who are Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada writes, the only auspicious activity in real sense are those which lead one to liberation. And factually, only activities in Krishna consciousness are auspicious. And Prabhupada writes, because the eightfold yoga system is directed toward the ultimate realization of such a practice is also auspicious. Because the purpose of Dhyana Yoga, elevation in Dhyana Yoga, ultimately leads to the realization of Krishna. Therefore, that is also auspicious. So now, first, Krishna assures you that person is not a loser. Prabhupada gives a couple of reasons why. Now, after assuring that there is not loser, Krishna is answering Arjuna's question, what is the destination of such a person? What exactly is the destination? So, if a yogi is unsuccessful, after many years of enjoyment, they are again born on the planet Earth. And there are two possibilities. They'll take birth either in aristocratic family or they will take birth in the family of righteous people. So it depends upon the advancement of a yogi. If the yogi is advanced, is only a little advanced on that path, not very advanced. They took up that process and in the very initial stages, they give up that process. Still, they will take birth in aristocratic family. But if a person took up the process, they made considerable advancement, but they could not complete it. So they take birth in the family of transcendentalists, where the direct training is given. And such a birth is rare in this world. And Prabhupada gives his own example. Birth in the family of yogis or transcendentalists, those with great wisdom, is praised herein because the child born in such a family receives a spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. It is especially the case in the Acharya or Goswami family. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters. In India, there are many Acharyas families, but they have now degenerated due to insufficient education and training. It is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such family. Fortunately, both our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self had the opportunity to take birth in such families by the grace of the Lord. Right? So this point is this point clear? The two kinds of destination. They enjoy, they go to heavenly planets, then they take birth in the families. Depending upon the kind of advancement they made, the birth is there. If there's less advancement in the aristocratic family, if there's more advancement in the family of transcendentalists. The birth in the family of transcendentalists is the rarest birth. It is considered the most auspicious birth, very high, and it's available to someone who has made progress and could not complete it. And then what happens on taking such a birth? They revive the divine consciousness and they continue making progress. So they are not lost. Whereas even if one is materially perfect in this life, next life, no guarantee. No guarantee of even of a human birth. And what happens by virtue of divine consciousness? They automatically becomes attracted to yogic principles. And then after answering, Krishna is urging Arjuna that how that a yogi is better than all others who endeavor for perfection. That means a person who is karma kandi, who is a karma yogi, or who is a jnani, yogi is better than all of them. And he is urging Arjuna, be a yogi. So let us quickly read this purport also, please. Yes, can someone please volunteer?
Well,
Okay,
well,
someone Prabhu who has not read so far.
yes, Guruji.
Yes, Shruti Priyamatani, please.
Purport, Prabhuji.
Yes, yes.
When we speak of yoga, we refer to linking our consciousness with the supreme absolute truth. Such a process is named differently by various practitioners in terms of the particular method adopted. When the linking process is predominantly in fruitive activities, it is called karma yoga. When it is predominantly empirical, it is called jnana yoga. And when it is predominantly in a devotional relationship with the Supreme Lord, it is called bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness is the ultimate perfection of all yogas, as will be explained in the next verse. The Lord has confirmed herein the superiority of yoga, but he has not mentioned that it is better than bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is full spiritual knowledge, and therefore nothing can excel it. Asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. Empiric knowledge without surrender to the Supreme Lord is also imperfect. And fruitive work without Krishna consciousness is a waste of time. Therefore, the most highly praised form of yoga performance mentioned here is Bhakti Yoga, and this is still more clearly explained in the next verse.
So the final verse of this chapter, after urging Arjuna to be a yogi, and Krishna is still further revealing his heart, who is the best yogi? Yogi nam api sarvesham madgate na antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktamo mata. Padri, can you please read this verse and purport? translation and Prabhupada as well. Can you continue reading, Madhuri?
Yes. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. The word bhajte is significant here. Bhajte has its root in the verb bhaj, which is used when there is need of service. The English word worship cannot be used in the same sense as bhaj. Worship means to adore or to show respect and honor to the worthy one. But service with love and faith is especially meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can avoid worshipping a respectable man or a demigod and may be called discourteous, but one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Lord without being thoroughly condemned. Every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus every living entity is intended to serve the Supreme Lord by his own constitution. Failing to do so, he falls down. The Bhagavatam 11.5.3 confirms this as follows. Yaisham Purusham Sakshat Atma Prabhavam Ishwaram Na Bhajante Avjananti Sthanad Prishta Patante Adha. Anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the primeval Lord, who is the source of all living entities, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. In this verse also the word bhajanti is used. Therefore, bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or to any other common living entity. The word avjananti used in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is also found in the Bhagavad Gita. Avjananti Mamura, Bhagavad Gita 9.11. Only the fools and rascals deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Such fools take it upon themselves to write commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita without an attitude of service to the Lord. Consequently, they cannot properly distinguish between the word bhajanti and the word worship. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of Bhakti in Bhakti Yoga. Yoga actually means Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are progressions towards the destination of Bhakti Yoga. From the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma Yoga without fruitive results is the beginning of this path. When Karma Yoga increases in knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called Jnana Yoga. When Jnana Yoga increases in meditation on the super soul by different physical processes, and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga Yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga Yoga and comes to the point of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, it is called Bhakti Yoga, the culmination. Factually, Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal, but to analyze Bhakti Yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name, Karma Yogi, Gyan Yogi, or Dhyan Yogi, Raj Yogi, Hat Yogi, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga, just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune that one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. The ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shyam Sundar, who is as beautifully colored as a cloud, whose lotus-like face is as effulgent as the sun, whose dress is brilliant with jewels, and whose body is flower garlanded. Illuminating all sides is his gorgeous luster, which is called the Brahm Jyoti. He incarnates in different forms such as Ram, Narsingh, Vara, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he descends like a human being as a son of Mother Yashoda, and he is known as Krishna, Govind, and Vasudeva. He is the perfect child, husband, friend, and master, and he is full with all opulences and transcendental qualities. If one remains fully conscious of these features of the Lord, he is called the highest yogi. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by Bhakti Yoga, as is confirmed in all Vedic literatures. यस्या देवे परा भक्तिर यथा देवे तथा गुरौ तस्य ते कथिताः अर्थाः प्रकाशन्ते महात्मना. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Shāstrī Upanishad 6.23. Bhaktir asya bhajanam tad iha mridu padhi nairasyana manushim mana kalpanam etad ev naishkarmyam. Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord, which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or in the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb the mind in the Supreme. That is the purpose of Naishkarmya, Gopal Tapni Upanishad 1.15. These are some of the means for performance of Bhakti or Krishna consciousness, the highest perfectional stage of the yoga system.
Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Dhyana Yoga. So yes, quite a long purport and yet a lot of essential and important points covered. First of all, Srila Prabhupada explained what is the importance of word bhajate in this verse, yoginam api sarvesham. So bhajate, it has come from the word bhaj. That means whenever there is service. It is not same as worship. So worship doesn't convey the same meaning as bhaj. It is loving service. So what is the difference between worship and service? Worship means to adore, to show respect and honor to worthy one, but service with love and faith is only used for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada explains how one cannot, although one can avoid worshipping an honorable man in this human society, but one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead without being thoroughly condemned. Because everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. Without being thoroughly condemned, one cannot avoid that service. And then Srila Prabhupada quotes verses from Bhagavatam simply to substantiate this difference further. And then Prabhupada gave different features of the Lord in which ideal yogi concentrates upon. And then how to achieve that highest yogic perfection that is given. And then the purpose of Nishkramya. And then Prabhupada finally says the conclusion of yoga ladder. It all starts from Karma Yoga without fruitive results, and it is concluded at Bhakti Yoga. So Nishkam Karma Yoga plus knowledge and renunciation is equal to Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga plus meditation is equal to Ashtanga Yoga. And Ashtanga Yoga plus realization of Krishna devotion, that leads to Bhakti Yoga. So Yoginam api sarvesham, and Srila Prabhupada is to say, therefore the gopis are the best of the yogis, because they're always meditating upon Krishna, on whatever they do. Okay. So a quick recap of what we discussed today in this chapter 6, right? So as we saw that in the last verses of chapter 5, Lord Krishna introduced the elements of Dhyana Yoga. And then in this chapter 6, Krishna is explaining all those principles of Dhyana Yoga in great detail. So first of all, in first 4 verses, Krishna explained that how one begins the practice of Dhyana Yoga. That Ashtanga yogis, they are like Nishkam Karma yogis, but they are engaged in work, in detached work to advance. And then Lord Krishna explained the 2 stages of this Dhyana Yoga. What was the first stage? Yoga Ruda stage. In that stage, the yogi is supposed to work with detachment and simultaneously engage in the various practices, performing asanas and so on. But when a person, devotee, becomes advanced, when that, Dhyana yogi or practitioner becomes advanced, that is the next stage of in which he can give up prescribed duties for further contemplation and meditation. The Yoga Ruda stage. And Prabhupada explains, Lord Krishna explains the different stages in Yoga Rudha stage. And then Lord Krishna explained about the necessity of controlling the mind. Arjuna asked questions, what happens if one is successful? And Krishna explains the destination of the unsuccessful yogi. And then Lord Krishna is urging Arjuna to become a yogi. And then he's giving a glimpse of, not glimpse, directly introducing the Bhakti, that last verse. It's a transition into the Bhakti chapters that will start tomorrow, chapter 7 to 12. Among all the yogis, who's the best yogi? Who's always thinking of Krishna with love and faith. Okay. So this concludes our chapter 6. We still have 15 minutes. Before give this unit a closure, are there any questions, any comments, any reflections? You can please ask. Yes, Ananta Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, before doing Bhakti śāstrī, I was not having a doubt in this verse, but now, after doing the last batch, I have a doubt. It's written in 41 that Suchinam Shrimatam Gehi, is it? Yeah. So it is written herein that first he goes to heavenly planets and then he takes birth in the family of righteous people or in the family of rich aristocracy. So in all of the Prabhupada's lectures or whatever lectures I've heard till now, this was the understanding that this or is there. So either he will go to the, either he will take birth in the family of righteous people or in the family of aristocratic families. But in the last batch, the tutor has specifically stressed that it is and, it's not or. So I just wanted to clear the doubt. Is this or the both the conditions should be satisfied?
How can one take birth in two families at once, Mataji?
He was saying that even if one is aristocrat people, and the family should be righteous also. So I don't know what is the basis of this understanding. Only in this point I couldn't understand, and I'm still.
Mataji, I'm not sure in what context, what point was made. My understanding is there are different destinations for the yogi depending upon the advancement. For a more advanced yogi, the birth is in the transcendental family. And if a person with a less advancement, the birth is in the aristocratic family. The birth in the transcendental family is a more glorious one. Is directly the training is given of the spiritual life from the very birth. And Prabhupada gives two such examples, his own self and of his own spiritual master. Right. And please refer to the quotes on the Srila Prabhupada quotes book also. Especially in this chapter, you'll get very interesting insights into it.
I've read that. So this is any one of the conditions, righteous or aristocratic. If one has progressed little.
If one has progressed little, it is in the aristocratic family. If one has progressed more, then it is in the transcendentalist family of transcendentalists.
But in the translation, it's written that is born in the family of righteous people or into the family of rich aristocracy.
Yes. So that's the same thing, Mataji. So what is the question in this? Or yes, or now what defines that? Who will take birth in which family? Is it transcendental or is it aristocratic? That is defined in the next verses and in the purport special of Prabhupada.
Okay, so you are saying that one who has progressed little, they will take birth in the family of rich aristocracy, and one who has advanced more, they will take birth in the family of transcendentalists.
I am not saying Mataji, Lord Krishna is saying in the next verse, and the purport is saying. I'm repeating that. If you read the verse 42.
Yeah, I've read, Prabhuji. Okay, ठीक है.
Okay. Yes, Kanchan Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have doubt from yesterday's discussion.
Yes,
In
please.
5.13 verse, purport's last line, it is written, therefore a Krishna conscious person is free from both the outer and inner activities of the material body. So what does it mean, the inner activities of the material body?
So there are outer activities by working senses, and there are inner activities by the subtle body. But the spirit soul is beyond the subtle body and actions of the subtle body and the gross body.
Okay, so here the inner activities mean the activities of the subtle body.
Yes. So they are not bound by material thinking and material feeling and material willing.
So Prabhuji, in the 5th chapter only, in the beginning verses, Srila Prabhupada is writing in the purport that's in context that Sankhya Yoga and another, this both processes are the same, although superficially one process appears to involve detachment and the other appears to involve attachment. I mean, they're saying that the aim is same. They're saying that the Prabhupada is giving example of watering the roots and finding the roots.
Yes. So what is the question?
Yes, I could not understand the aim is same, like they're using the different processes.
What is the goal of Sankhya Yoga? Or what is the goal of a Jnani? Or who analyze material nature, right? And they ultimately come to this conclusion that the spirit soul is not a part of this material world. In chapter 13, Krishna describes in more detail. And when Arjuna asks these components, Kshetra, Kshetragya, Prakriti, Purush, and then he explains what is this Kshetra consist of, this body, what is this body made up of? 24 elements, 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 objects of senses, and Bhumera Punal Vayu Kham Mano Buddhi Revacha. And then the Mahat Tattva. And but the spirit soul is beyond this. So through the process of Sankhya, they come to this conclusion that the Jivatma is not a part of material world. So this is like finding the root. But watering the root means acting on that level. Okay, what do I do with that knowledge? Once I realize that spirit soul is transcendental, now I have to act in that capacity as well. That is like watering the root. So when one acts in Krishna consciousness on the Brahmabhuta platform, that is acting on the spiritual platform, acting in the spiritual activities. But in the Sankhya Yoga, it is like watering, it is finding the root. In the other part, it is like watering the root. That's all.
Yes, this was my question.
So when we say detachment and attachment in the Sankhya, it stresses on detachment from matter. But when one is attached to the spirit, that automatically involves detachment from the matter. So superficially, they may look different. One process is talking about detachment, the other process is talking about attachment. But one who is in knowledge, he understands it's the same, because attachment to spirit implies detachment from matter. They're the two sides of the same coin. Okay, yes. Yes, other questions? Yes, Anandita Madhuri, please.
I'm sorry, Prabhuji. I have read the purport again, and this 41 especially relates to those who have practiced less. So in the translation and in the first paragraph, wherein Prabhupada explains that that person goes to the heavenly planets and enjoys for a long period of time, and then one is sent back again to this planet to take birth in the family of a righteous Brahmin Vaishnav or of aristocratic merchants. And in the next paragraph, he also repeats the same thing, that they are given opportunities to live a prosperous life in righteous and or aristocratic families. But the 42 verse directly, he directly takes to the families of transcendentalists, wherein he doesn't mention that he will go to the heavenly planets or like that. So again, my question is that, I'm sorry, I'm very sorry, but again, I'm confused that is there a choice that the person who have practiced less after coming from the heavenly planet, they have a choice of taking birth either in the family of righteous Brahmin or aristocratic families, or what's that?
It is not dependent upon their own choice. Whatever Krishna sanctions, it is for them. And it is more a case of taking birth in aristocratic family. They don't have a choice. They go to heavenly planet, then they are supposed to take birth in that family. And from there, they are supposed to continue their advancement. The important point to understand is, first of all, there is no loss, as in opposed to that Arjuna was asking. Krishna establishing there is no loss. Second point to understand is, a person continues his spiritual journey from where he or she left in the previous birth. That is the important point. And among the choice in the birth, a birth in the family of transcendentalists is a higher birth. It is a rare birth. It gives facility for making further advancement. However, in Kali Yuga, Prabhupada writes, even such families are degrading because of lack of education. So there is no guarantee. It's a risky business. Better complete your process journey within this life. But even if you're not able to complete, there's no loss, Krishna is saying. Your result is not lost. You make the journey. Your future birth is auspicious. So there's no inauspicious. On the other hand, if someone becomes materially perfect, doesn't care about Krishna consciousness, that is still inauspicious path.
Yeah, thank you.
So don't worry about the future births, this life, this aristocratic or transcendentalist. Complete your journey within this life, go back. And otherwise, Krishna is saying, trust. You'll wherever you left, you will continue that.
Prabhuji, I'm just worrying for my understanding.
And Bhagavatam says, even there's no guarantee of even a human form of life also. One can fall in the lower species of life as well. Prabhupada writes this in the previous purports also. But still, whatever advancement is there, that is still preserved. It is not lost. Therefore, it is still auspicious path. Okay, yes, Harshitam Atiti.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Pranam. Thank you, Prabhuji, for all the sessions. I have doubt in 2-3 verses. First, a follow-up from what you said, that Bhagavatam says, and also in 6.40 Prabhupada says that even a low-born birth in next life. So in one verse, Swalpam apiyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat, in that verse, Prabhupada says that one is saved from the greatest fears even if one does little bit. So that greatest fear he mentions as not having a human birth. So there he says, if little bit Krishna consciousness we take a human birth. And here, like Bhagavatam also says that we might not get a human birth also. So how to seemingly appears contradictory. So how to understand?
That's not contradictory. All protection is given. And if a person is given even the lower birth, that is also part of protection plan of Krishna. That karma that is necessary for rectifying the consciousness of the jiva. So don't see it as a punishment. when it is ordained under the protection of Krishna, that is still a part of a purificatory process. And secondly, it should make me more aware and cautious that human birth is also not essential. And this also reminds us the prayer of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he's praying that even if I have to take birth as a dog or as a low-born creature, let that birth be in the family of devotees, and that will also be auspicious for me. So we don't know how the workings of Krishna happens, but what is assured, Name Bhakta Pranishyati. Krishna takes care of his devotee. The protection is always given. But yes, in terms of, and generally the human birth is given. But yes, it is not absolutely 100% that I'll do whatever. I chanted one round of Hare Krishna, and now I may do whatever I want. Next human life is gonna, it doesn't work like that. So we have example of someone on the level of Bhav, just like Bharat Maharaj, also happened to be in the level of deer, right? And when we read 8th chapter, the criteria is your thoughts at the time of death. That is the main criteria. That's the life you get in the next life.
So how to understand this property that Prabhupada says in that purpose? Swalpam ki human birth is guaranteed. How to understand this then?
So it is guaranteed. Yes, it is guaranteed. One who make a little progress, that is guaranteed. Yes, but same Prabhupada writes in the chapter 8, and same Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam in the section of Bharat Maharaj.
Okay, so,
And same Prabhupada is speaking about in the lectures, and he's giving discourses. So understand the verse and the context and what the Prabhupada is emphasizing, right? So if let us say, Prabhupada also says so many times, if someone who is staying in Vrindavan Dham but is engaged in illicit activities, they take the body in the lower form of life, and after completing that body, they go back to Godhead, right? So there are many viewpoints and that, but that is why the underlying principle is that path is still auspicious. The protection of Krishna is always there. You will not get any loss. This Krishna is trying to emphasize again, like he's telling, even if someone don't trust my word, Arjuna, you declare. You will never ever be a loser by surrendering yourself to Krishna. This much is absolutely guaranteed, and there is no exceptions to this. Anywhere in the Shastra, there is not even a single exception. It is 100% guaranteed principle. You will never be a loser if you give something to Krishna. If you give your life, if you give your time, if you give your money, if you give anything to Krishna, Krishna is the most grateful person. He's the most loving person. And he's your supreme well-wisher friend. He will never ever let you down in your life. This much is absolutely guaranteed. But how Krishna will make that happen, no one can guarantee that. No one can know that in future. Krishna is the most mysterious person also. And he's so personal. He's so personal with devotees. He deals very differently with different individuals. So in your case, he will deal in the most loving and the most personal manner, whatever is suitable for your, in whatever way that will bring out more and more love of you towards him. He will deal with you in such a manner. So don't worry, give up all sorts of anxiety and be rest assured. If you're taking the path of bhakti, it's the most auspicious path.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, in 6.46,
I think
Prabhupada
it's already 9:32, and we can conclude our class at this point, I think. And if there are still questions, I'm here. But let us officially close this session at this point. So I would like to thank you very, very much for all your wonderful attention and time in all these classes. It's been my pleasure interacting with all of you. And I know you have a very, very auspicious future. So many wonderful Vaishnavas. My own teachers are coming to take this course tomorrow because Vanshivardhan Prabhu will be starting. You all are so blessed and fortunate to have his association. And then next chapter is His Grace Kamalochan Prabhu will be taking. So rest assured, even if you have any doubts, even if you missed any class, attend these 2 units. Don't miss even a single second of what's coming up in line with you. All your if you missed anything on this, you don't have to worry. Everything will be covered in the next 2 units as well, in the most wonderful way. So I would like to encourage all of you, take the best benefit, make the most out of it in the upcoming sessions of Bhagavad Gita. This is the most rarest of opportunity you are getting to study directly from Kamalochan Prabhu and Vanchivalan Prabhu. Make the most out of it. And in these chapters, if you still have any query questions, you can always reach out to me on my email ID, or you have that document, you can write those questions, and through your coordinators, you're most welcome. So thank you very much for all your attention, all your wonderful discussions, and all your wonderful questions. And this Bhagavad Gita is a journey of a lifetime. Keep reading again and again. Keep serving Bhagavad Gita. And each year, each time you read, it will bring out more and more insights. And once the subject matter starts making sense, our spiritual life starts taking, our spiritual life starts becoming more and more exciting, more and more refreshing and nourishing. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. I think we have some announcements coming up, and I'm still here. If you have any questions after that, we can continue. Or those who want